This is the BBC. For details of our complete range of programmes, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the latest global news compiled in the early hours of Tuesday, the 10th of October. I'm Regid Ahmed with a selection of highlights from across BBC World Service News today. Coming up, US media reports say Russian agents attempted to influence last year's American presidential election by buying adverts on Google.
So-called Russian operatives spent tens of thousands of dollars on ads on Google Search and Gmail in an attempt to spread, disinformation, sway the outcome in favour of Donald Trump.
Also in the podcast, one of the worst firestorms in California's history is tearing through the state's wine regions.
Anyone who's out there who is contemplating not evacuating, we just plead with them to please leave.
The standoff between the UK government and the European Union over Brexit deepens, with both sides insisting the other must make concessions. And excuses. This is what Scotland football manager Gordon Strachan had to say after his team failed to qualify for the World Cup finals.
Genetically, we're behind. With the last campaign, we were the second smallest, apart from Spain.
So what did he mean? And was he being just a little bit cheeky? Stay tuned to find out. But first, US media say Google has discovered that Russian agents spent large sums of money on adverts in an effort to influence last year's American presidential election. US intelligence agencies concluded earlier this year that Moscow had interfered in the poll. I asked our correspondent in Los Angeles, David Willis, for more details on what the reports are saying.
These reports, Reged, are based on people who the Washington Post says are familiar with Google's investigation, and they maintain that so-called Russian operatives spent tens of thousands of dollars on ads on Google Search and Gmail, as well as YouTube, which Google also owns, in an attempt to spread, disinformation, sway the outcome of last year's presidential election in favour of Donald Trump. Now, this follows the revelation that Twitter had uncovered hundreds of accounts that were linked to Russian groups. Facebook also has unearthed thousands of ads bought by a company called the Internet Research Agency. Now, that's an organisation that was set up in St. Petersburg in 2013, whose sole purpose is basically to engage in what's called online influencing.
Now, what's Google's response been?
Well, Google has issued a brief statement saying that it has a strict set of advertising policies already in place, but adding that it was now working with researchers and other companies to take what it called a deeper look at attempts to abuse its system. Google also says that it will assist with ongoing inquiries, and there are several congressional inquiries already underway, Regid, into this whole issue. The congressional committees have invited Google executives to testify, along with officials from Facebook and Twitter, early next month.
David Willis in Los Angeles. Staying in California, and wildfires are ripping through the state's wine regions, forcing hundreds of people to flee their homes. It's one of the worst such incidents in US history. Jonathan Cox from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection has urged people in the affected areas to get out straight away.
This is our number one priority. All of the fire equipment you see out there are trying to get people evacuated and to a safe place. And anyone who's out there who is contemplating not evacuating, we just plead with them to please leave. If they feel like they're in danger, to leave their homes. This fire is moving extremely quickly. It's very dynamic, and really we're calling for resources from all over Northern California to try to get a handle on it.
Our correspondent Dave Lee is following the latest developments.
Firefighters are tackling more than 14 separate fires across Napa, Sonoma and Yuba, counties that make up California's famed wine region north of San Francisco. Gusts measuring as strong as 71 miles per hour meant the fire spread extremely quickly on Sunday into Monday morning. California Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency and several towns have been evacuated.
And just before we recorded this podcast, I spoke to Esther Mobley, a wine writer in San Francisco.
People I've spoken with have described it as looking like the aftermath of a bombing or something.
And we're hearing that these fires are actually moving very quickly.
Yeah, they are, and CAL FIRE is reporting little to zero containment on many of them. Right now we have, they say there are 14 fires burning in Northern California. 20,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. And right now, last I heard, it was 73,000 acres were burning. The fires are burning in multiple locations across Napa and Sonoma counties. They're just to the north of the San Francisco Bay. They're, by all accounts, the two most important wine-growing regions in America. Together generate billions of dollars locally annually. They employ tens and tens of thousands of people.
Obviously, everyone's hoping that people are safe from these fires. But in terms of the business side of things, what impact is this going to have? We've
confirmed that a few wineries have indeed burned, and we can expect that at least 3 years of their work are probably completely gone. If a vineyard burns, it's at least about 5 years before you could even conceivably see fruit again. So if a lot of the sites that hold grapes in Northern California have burned, we don't know what sort of shortage we're looking at.
Esther Mobley in California. Later today, the crisis in Catalonia will move to a new and potentially decisive phase. The Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, is due to address the regional parliament. He has been dropping heavy hints that he will, at that point, unilaterally declare Catalonia's independence from Spain following a disputed referendum. But the squeeze on Mr Puigdemont appears to be growing. On Monday, the French Minister for European Affairs, Nathalie Loiseau, said France would not recognise any newly declared Catalan state.
What's important is that this crisis needs to be resolved through dialogue at all levels of Spanish politics. If there were to be a declaration of independence, it would be unilateral and it wouldn't be recognised, and everyone knows that. And Carles Puigdemont knows that very well too, and that's what will ensue.
The BBC's Tom Burridge is in Barcelona. Tim Franks asked him just how much pressure Mr Puigdemont is under.
I think he's under huge pressure. There's sort of various angles to that. So firstly, within his own party, we know that, they're not speaking totally as one voice on this, given some of the comments they've been giving to us over the last 24 hours. Then you've got, within his coalition of pro-independence parties, a radically left-wing party, which is saying there has to be a declaration on independence. That was what we agreed with Mr Puigdemont's coalition. So that party is pressuring him too. You've got the pressure from the Spanish government, which has thousands of national Spanish police here in Barcelona, remember. The government, clearly, the Spanish government has a contingency plan in place, that I am sure of, and, they are ready to act if they deem that necessary. So he's been pushed by the pro-independence camp, but at the same time, he has all those other forces at play, including the international community. No European government has said they would support a declaration of independence.
And how far is that pressure growing as a result of major companies inside Catalonia saying they're uneasy about all this?
Well, we've seen a drip effect from businesses. Now, some very, very big, emblematic companies here in Catalonia, CaixaBank, it is, the biggest high street bank, the biggest name. It is associated with this region. They've said that they will move their sort of headquarters in terms of where it is actually sort of registered. And another bank, a big bank, Sabadell. Other companies, smaller businesses, have said that they're willing and planning to move their headquarters to other parts of Spain too. Now, whether all those companies actually make good those threats will depend on how events play out over the next few days. But of course, the economic angle, the financial angle to this is important too. Barcelona has, a very powerful economy. It's one of the engine rooms of the Spanish economy more generally. And the economics of this has, driven to some extent the pro-independence camp here. You go back to the financial crisis here in Spain. During that period, the argument that the Catalan regional devolved administration gets a raw economic deal from the Spanish central government was one that was aired all the time. Some people who don't actually want independence actually do want more autonomy, namely more financial autonomy, similar to a deal that the Basque Country has up in another region of Spain.
Given that Mr. Puigdemont has said in terms, not least to you, Tom, last week you broke the story that he was planning to declare independence within days, how can he, if he does want to, how can he find an elegant way out of that promise?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's a difficult question to answer. Look, my gut feeling when I woke up this morning was that actually, him and his inner circle have rowed back a bit. That, they're beginning to think, really, even if they make this unilateral declaration, what will it mean in practice? It's not going to be recognised abroad. It's going to be a sort of carte blanche, probably, for the Spanish government to intervene, probably take over control of the regional government here. Mr. Puigdemont and his inner circle could be arrested. That's also definitely on the cards. And I had that sense that they were beginning to think, actually, is it the best strategy for us now? And it could be still their way of thinking. I'm told that they have reached a decision, but my source wouldn't tell me what that decision was. I'm not surprised at that, because they're obviously saving it for this address to the Catalan Parliament.
Tom Burridge in Barcelona. Police in Austria have called for clarity over a controversial new law banning the full face veil in public. The Austrian press agency, APA, says officers have acted against several street performers. Bethany Bell is in Vienna.
According to Upper, a man wearing a shark costume is the latest to run up against the new law. The man who was advertising a shop in central Vienna is said to have been reluctant to remove his shark mask. Police have now charged the shop which employed him. Street musicians who wear animal masks have also received police warnings. Meanwhile, an Algerian billionaire has promised to pay the fines of all women who are punished for wearing the niqab or burqa. It's estimated that only around 150 Austrians actually wear them.
As we've been reporting, it was exactly half a century ago that one of the world's most famous revolutionary figures, Ernesto Che Guevara, died. The Argentine-born doctor joined the Cuban Revolution, fighting alongside Fidel Castro to overthrow the military government in 1959 and then to install a Marxist-Leninist economic model in Cuba. Although Che was famed for his socialist ideals, today one of his children keeps his name alive through a very different approach. He runs a private business on the island offering motorbike tours to tourists. In Cuba, Will Grant went along for a ride.
Cubans barely bat an eyelid at the sight of 1950s classic automobiles or Soviet-era Ladas still running decades after they came off the assembly line. But heads turn in Havana when a fleet of brand-new motorbikes roars past, especially when those bikes are American-made hogs. Behind the handlebars of one of them is the son of Latin America's best-known revolutionary icon, Che Guevara. 52-year-old Ernesto Guevara has inherited much from his father, including his strong features, his name, and his passion for motorbikes. But unlike Che, Ernesto's life has taken a very different path, into tourism. He runs a motorbike tour company whose only link to his father is in the name, Poderosa Tours, after La Poderosa, the famous Norton 500cc on which Che crossed the Americas in the Motorcycle Diaries.
This is a private company we have using foreign capital, working alongside some state-run Cuban companies. That is not a new union. It's been happening for years now, for centuries in fact.
Ernesto gave us rare access to join him on a road trip.
There it is, the unmistakable roar of the Harley-Davidson as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think maybe a dozen motorbikes make their way out of Havana and onto the open road, heading out west to tobacco-growing country. It is very cool. You can see already why this is such a popular holiday.
Americans my age, we've never been able to come to Cuba, and now we can, and I don't know how long that will last, so I thought I had to jump through this window when I could.
Later, we took a city tour around Havana with Ernesto, which included a stop by the huge cast-iron mural of his father in the Plaza de la Revolución. Despite his famous surname, Ernesto insists he is very much his own man.
It's never been a big deal to me that I have the surname Guevara, and I have never used my surname for anything. I wasn't born that way. The upbringing my mother gave me would never have allowed me to act like that.
As we zoomed around the capital, we reached a place synonymous with the darker side of his father, the Cabaña Fortress. It was here that in 1959 Che Guevara presided over the revolutionary trials and subsequent executions of members of the ousted military government. Critics accused Che Guevara of carrying out summary justice, but unsurprisingly the younger Guevara doesn't see it that way.
It's complicated to explain to people what things were like at the start of the revolution. What I can say is that those who were killed weren't just executed. They held revolutionary tribunals with their lawyers, their defenses, with everything they needed to defend themselves, like any human being.
As the son of a famous Marxist whose image adorns every street corner in Cuba, Ernesto Guevara knows he has his critics, especially in Miami, who accuse him of double standards for running a capitalist venture on a communist island.
But criticism from Miami isn't something that bothers him.
I'm the manager because I like doing this, because it was my idea to start doing tourism by motorbike, nothing more. It has nothing to do with whether it's socialist or capitalist. It makes no sense to focus on that issue.
Ernesto Guevara ending that report by Will Grant. You're listening to Global News, the most important stories and the best interviews and on-the-spot reporting from the BBC World Service. A reminder that every weekend you can hear a review of the week's main news stories and why they matter. That's in The World This Week, and the programme is also available to download from our website. The negotiations over Britain's exit from the European Union are continuing, with both sides claiming it's up to the other to make concessions. Speaking in Brussels, the spokesman for the European Commission, Margaritis Hinas, painted a rather bleak picture, suggesting the talks were stuck at the first stage.
There is a clear sequencing to these talks, and there has been so far no solution found on step one, which is the divorce proceedings. So the ball is entirely in the UK court.
Addressing Parliament here in London, the Prime Minister Theresa May insisted Britain had already made significant concessions and that the next step was now up to the European Union.
Mr. Speaker, a new deep and special partnership between a sovereign United Kingdom and a strong and successful European Union is our ambition and our offer to our European friends. And as we look forward to the next stage, the ball is in their court, but I'm optimistic it will receive a positive response. Because what we are seeking is not just the best possible deal for us, but I believe that will also be the best possible deal for our European friends too.
So are these negotiations in danger of descending into farce? A question for our political correspondent, Rob Watson.
I think it's certainly the case that there is a real danger, perhaps not more than 50%, but maybe about 50%, that there will be no deal and they will break down. And I think that's partly because of pressure of time. After all, these talks are supposed to reach a deal in time for Britain to leave the European Union in 2019, and they're immensely complicated. But I think perhaps more importantly, of course, it's just the incredible complexity of the politics involved. And I think it seems to me, and this is becoming clearer and clearer, the big chance really is of a miscalculation on behalf of the UK, because I think, put crudely, the UK is betting the farm on the idea that in the end the EU27 will think, well, I know we said that Britain can't have a better deal outside the EU than in, but we do need to trade with Britain and that they should have a good free trade deal. And it may well be, and there are plenty of signs of this, that the UK's negotiating hand is weaker than it thinks, and that actually the EU27 think that EU solidarity it trumps business concerns.
But are there then real growing fears and growing concerns that in the end the UK is just going to have to accept whatever deal is on offer by the deadline or crash out of the EU?
Well, I think that there is a growing sense that there may well be no deal. And of course, that very much splits Britain's governing Conservative Party, because you have the hardcore Brexiteers almost saying, come on, bring it on. We don't want to pay any money to the EU. We don't want to be any part of the EU in any way, shape or form anymore. Britain will be just fine trading with the rest of the world. But those in the Conservative Party and beyond who really, really worry about Britain's decision to leave the EU think that leaving without any kind of deal whatsoever would be an absolute disaster. And I have to say that, of course, most businesses, most economists, most lawyers agree with that second, rather gloomy prognosis for no deal.
What can unstick these negotiations?
That's a very good question. I think perhaps just over the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, the idea that the EU and the UK find that economics, business does trump politics.
Our UK political correspondent Rob Watson. Now to South Africa, where a woman who found 3 men allegedly raping her daughter has had the murder charges against her dropped. The mother was accused of killing one of the men. Here's Nomsa Maseko.
South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority has declined to proceed with the case against the woman, saying chances of a successful prosecution were slim. Her 27-year-old daughter was allegedly gang-raped by 3 men last month. The woman was arrested after killing one of her daughter's alleged rapists and wounded 2 others. The surviving suspects are being held in police custody and have been charged with rape. The woman, who cannot be named to protect her child's identity, walked in on the 3 suspects who were sexually assaulting her daughter at a house near Lady Frere in South Africa's largely rural Eastern Cape province. Many South Africans have rallied behind the woman and started a crowdfunding campaign to help pay for her legal fees.
An intellectual in Thailand has been charged with insulting the monarchy for questioning the story of a 400-year-old royal battle. Our Asia-Pacific editor Michael Bristow reports.
Thai history books say that in 1593 King Naresuan defeated a Burmese royal in a duel in which both were riding elephants. The battle led to the country's independence and is still celebrated as one of Thailand's most pivotal moments. But 3 years ago, during a university discussion, the Thai intellectual Sulak Siwalak suggested the story should not necessarily be taken literally. Historians might think this approach wise, but Thailand's current military rulers don't agree. Mr. Sulak has been charged with insulting the monarchy and faces 15 years in jail. Thailand has some of the world's toughest laws to protect its royals. When they were written, they appeared to relate only to the serving first family, but the military government now interprets those rules far more broadly. Even a royal battle fought more than 4 centuries ago cannot, it seems, be questioned.
Michael Bristow. A new graphic version of Anne Frank's famous diary has been produced by the creators of the Oscar-nominated animation Waltz with Bashir. The Jewish teenager, one of more than 1 million children killed during the Holocaust, has come to symbolise courage, optimism and determination. Anna Holligan has been to Amsterdam to explore Anne Frank's enduring appeal to young people.
So, I'm India and I'm from Harris Academy in Dundee. We do have similar personalities, like I'm a bookworm, I love books.
India is 14 years old. The teenage diarist helped her to empathise with an otherwise unimaginable and distant chapter of history.
So I've always wanted to go to Anne Frank's house. This is always on my bucket list. Like, we're all so similar to her.
So the timeline goes from about 1929 till 1945.
India and her classmates are entering the canal-side warehouse where Anne's father once sold the gelling agent Pectin. They've come to learn more about her life.
I mean, it's an incredible piece of writing. There's touches where you can see that she's a 13-year-old girl, but other times she's just incredibly eloquent.
Ellie Lane is from the Anne Frank Trust.
It's understandable. Kids can understand her emotions. She's talking about going through puberty, and that's something that they can understand. And it's just really easy for them to sort of put a human face on something that's got 6 million people, which is hard to understand, but if you've got one person, it really just brings it all to life.
Her family survived for almost 2 years, tiptoeing around on these creaky floorboards in the dark, damp confines of the Actor House, or secret annex, before being discovered. Anne Frank was 15 years old when she died. She was an aspiring author. Today, her diary is one of the most read books in the world. The graphic interpretation reflects Anne's vivid imagination, her hopes, faith in humanity, and quintessential teenage frustrations. Speaking at the launch, the writer and director Ari Folman explained he wanted to ensure Anne's legacy remained relevant.
We're really coming to the era where there won't be any Holocaust survivors on Earth, and there won't be any live witnesses to tell the story. There might be a situation that the entire story will take like you take in the movies, and it will look like ancient history. And this is why it is so essential to find ways to preserve it.
More and more people are reading the original diary every year. At the Montessori primary school that Anne Frank attended before the Nazis created Jewish-only schools, not all of the pupils are convinced the new version is necessary.
It feels normal now because we come here a lot. Yeah. But I think when other kids that are not on the school and just look, it's very special to walk here.
Yeah. Sammy Neeter is 11 years old.
Yeah, I think when you look at the pictures, you cannot really see what happened. When you read, you can see more that happens. I find myself.
With your own imagination.
Yeah.
My name is Zahara. It's a nice way for littler children, but once you go to the secondary school, I think you should just read the original book because it's very nice and it has really her words in it. It's important to know how sad it was and to not make the same mistake in the future. Yeah, and that's a very valuable lesson.
The pupils from Dundee's Harris Academy have stepped out of the claustrophobic confines of the secret annex, inspired after literally walking an hour in Anne Frank's footsteps.
I'm Joshua Hood. Now that we've came here, we can really, really tell how much went on for the Jews, and we need to band together and not let that happen again.
Some of the images in the graphic novel are dark and obviously disturbing. Of course, the secret of Anne Frank's enduring appeal will always be in her own words. Here's a translation of just a few of them.
How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the whole world.
That report from Anna Holligan. The last time Scotland qualified for the Football World Cup finals was in France in 1998, and for nearly an hour on Sunday evening it appeared as if the dream of again qualifying for the finals remained alive as they led 1-0 against Slovenia. But the match finished 2-2 and Scotland again missed out. In the post-match interviews, the Scotland manager Gordon Strachan had a rather novel reason for his team's narrow failure.
Genetically, we're behind. With the last campaign, we were the second smallest, apart from Spain. We'll have to work at things. I don't know, we get big women and men together, see what we can do. But it is a problem for us because we have to fight harder for every ball and jump higher than anybody else because it's easier for these kind of guys.
So size matters, he says. To find out more, I asked our sports reporter Ben Sutherland whether the comments were tongue-in-cheek.
Gordon Strachan has quite a history, actually, of playing with journalists. In fact, he almost thinks of them as like a battle, going in there to not necessarily poke fun, but he's definitely sees it a bit adversarial. And there are a lot of times in the past when he's made jokes and taken on journalists in various ways. So I'm not totally sure that all of this is to be taken that seriously. But clearly, the point about this was that Scotland started this campaign very poorly. But the last 6 games, they've been unbeaten. They've come devastatingly close to making the playoffs of the World Cup. They've only gone out on goal difference. He feels that his players really gave everything, and to not quite have made it because they've lost out on goal difference is very disappointing for them. So rather than maybe focus on where they've fallen short, as it were, he's looking at a different factor.
So then, is it a little bit of sour grapes, or does height have something to do with whether you're a successful football player?
Well, look, I mean, one of the things that he said was, if you look at, in the last campaign, we were the second smallest apart from Spain. Now, that's a pretty big apart. That's sort of up there with, apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, what did you think of the play? Because effectively what you're looking at here is Spain are this extraordinary team. Obviously, yes, the last World Cup they struggled, but before that, their massive run of success, a World Cup and 2 European Championships. Yes, they have the likes of Iniesta, Fabregas and David Silva, which really does make a bit of a difference. But, Lionel Messi is World Player of the Year several times over, and he's only 5'7" or 1 metre 70. Robert Snodgrass, who was playing up front for Scotland last night, is 6'1". So that's an advantage in favour of Snodgrass in terms of height, but maybe not in terms of quality.
Ben Sutherland ending this edition of the Global News Podcast. An updated version will be available for you to download later. If you want to comment on this podcast or the topics covered in it, you can send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Regid Ahmed. Until next time, goodbye.